You are listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to instruct and to encourage the daily practice of our faith.
Pax et bonum, peace and good to you all. Welcome to another episode of Aim Higher. I am Sister Catherine, and today is our third installment of our series of the pursuit of virtue. And for the month of March is mortification. And of course, I'm not going at this alone, thank goodness, because joining me today is His Excellency, Most Reverend Giles Butler, OFM. How are you today, Your Excellency?
I'm doing well, sister.
All right. I figured we will keep up with our trend of starting with a quote. So I have from the book A Year with the Saints. And this quote is actually from our Holy Father, St. Francis of Assisi. So the greatest gift one can receive from God in this world is wisdom, power, and will to conquer himself by denying self-will. Any comment, Your Excellency?
Excellent. Yes, in order to advance in the spiritual life, it is first necessary that we should deny ourselves. And of course, we can't do that by ourselves. So we beg of God the wisdom, the wisdom, the will.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What all St. Francis had to say there?
Wisdom, wisdom, power, and will.
The wisdom, the power, and the will to deny ourselves.
Our self-will.
So our Lord throughout the Gospels tells us, and it's a favorite topic of mine, deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and come follow me. And this I interpret not just for the apostles, but for every Christian, everyone who wants to be a follower of Christ, a disciple of Christ. We must constantly deny ourselves. It is a sacrifice. And of course, of ourselves, we can do nothing. And so we should pray to God for those graces, the wisdom to know that we need to overcome ourselves, that we need to deny ourselves, that this is what God has called us to do, the power to do so, the strength to do so, and also the willingness to do so. So these are gifts that God has given us, but we must do our part, or that he asks us to pray for, that we need to seek from God. And it is really an asking that we receive. If we don't ask for these virtues, for this specific cause, it becomes truly, I think, impossible to deny ourselves, to take up a daily cross and to follow Christ. There's no doubt that everybody has a cross, whether you want it or not. We are constantly frustrated in one way or another in pursuing our own will. But what we're seeking as Christians, as Catholics, is the willingness to sacrifice this willingness to give up without becoming frustrated, anxious, depressed, which the world is going to take our will away from us. We don't get everything we want. It's a hard lesson for so many spoiled children, but that is the reality of it. And in the spiritual life, we really make a virtue of necessity. We can't have our own way all the time, but if we turn this necessity into a virtue, we gain merit before God. And so really we need to take seriously what St. Francis is saying there and pray to God that we have the wisdom, the power, and the will to overcome our self-will.
What kind of popped in my head as you were speaking, the world definitely advocates the idea of doing what you want, and many look at our faith as being very constricting. And it made me think about how in the religious life, people might view it as, maybe even when they don't know better, they could feel sad for me because I can't just go and do whatever I want at any given time. But I don't feel I don't feel that that's actually happening in the sense because, and I've told people this, I want to do God's will. So by doing whatever's asked of me is doing God's will. Therefore, I'm doing what I want.
Well, let me put this to you. If you were out in the world would you be doing exactly what you want, when you
No,
want it, where you
and
want it,
that's the
how you
other
want
thing.
it?
Absolutely. Most people their day is dictated by a schedule. Work, your children, school, no matter how young you are, really. I mean, even a little infant is at the mercy of someone's timeline. You do not really get to choose exactly what you're going to do when you want to do it. I mean, and if you were to reflect on it, I mean, most decisions you make are still not completely for yourself, or it's not strictly self-serving.
Well,
Maybe it's
yes,
what I'm trying to say.
and you might say it's self-serving. I have a job because I want money. I want to go on a vacation. So I'm going to keep my job to go on a vacation. But now, day in and day out, in order to keep this job, I have to show up on time. I have to do the work that's assigned to me, not only do the work, but to do it with at least a spirit of cheerfulness and willingness. If I'm a drag on the company, even though I'm doing a good job, but if I'm a drag on the company and the morale, I'm not going to keep this job very long.
But most people are working because, well, they need food on the table, roof over their head. I mean, that's just how it's going to work. No matter how, even if you had your sights on a certain career and did everything you could to achieve that career, there's still, I also like how people talk about someone who owns their own business. Like, it must be so great to be your own boss and to do whatever you want. But that's so inaccurate, because someone that owns a business is still at the mercy of their clientele, their customers. They can't just, change their hours, change their policies on a whim.
Well, they're open. The owner of the business is really on call 24/7. He never really gets a break. He doesn't get to clock out and go home, because if anything happens, he is the one that needs to be there. He's the one that has to make the decisions. So owning your own business is really doing someone else's will, being there for someone else and someone else's need and their time. And really, that's where every one of us finds ourselves in this world. And it seems stupid not to make this a virtue, to turn
an opportunity.
This necessity is an opportunity to grow in grace and virtue, and to make really a virtue out of this necessity. This opportunity is here every single day.
I like that. It's just, if anything, if you're called to religious life, but you think, oh, I'm not going to be happy there. Just know, I mean, I probably feel freer as a religious, although my duties keep getting more, but it's just a different responsibility.
Well, I often preach that happiness is a choice. You can choose to be happy wherever you are, whatever you're doing. You can actually choose to be happy no matter if the world is crumbling around you. You can still find joy. You can find something to be happy about. God is still in heaven. God is still in charge. All things work for the good of those who love God. Even this catastrophe that is falling down all around me is an excellent opportunity for me to patiently bear this, perhaps to offer it up for the poor souls in purgatory, for the salvation of someone else's soul, even reparation for my own sins. So it is an opportunity for us to find happiness, to find peace in this self-denial, and really to gain merit, to gain virtue, to advance in the spiritual life.
Well, what comes to my mind now is the idea of, sometimes we think a proper suffering, a proper cross, it entails something very extreme. Our daily crosses are like, even really those minor things, those little slivers. That's what's really, and bearing those things patiently and consistently is better than taking on an extreme penance. And maybe we'll get into what when you read the lives of the saints, you read about some of the things that they did. And I don't know if you and I know we've talked about this outside of here, obviously here at this moment, but I don't know if Father Anthony and I have touched on it. I think we have that, doing something in the sense of, like St. Rose of Lima, she wore a chain around her waist and it cut into her skin. And it got to the point where she actually had to remove it. but the church does not actually sanction that. Does that? And I mean, that would not be better than maybe offering up or some little inconvenience. I mean, we shouldn't think that doing things like that is more. It's going to get you a better score, like as if God keeps score. I think we kind of keep score on ourselves, which is really kind of I wouldn't say a waste, but unnecessary. But I guess what I'm trying to go with that is, don't feel like you're failing if you read what some of the saints have done and think, well, I don't do that. What chance do I have?
Well, in the spiritual life, we learn that there is more merit in doing some insignificant act out of holy obedience. Just picking up the trash off the street out of holy obedience, sweeping the floor in holy obedience. There is more merit in that self-denial of our will than in choosing some austere penance of ourselves. I would say there's, rather than a black fast one whole day, simply doing something for someone else at the will of someone else, no matter how insignificant it is. And there is merit and virtue in these little tiny things that we sacrifice for the love of God, or any other love, if you will, that is connected with the love of God.
And that makes me think of a story I read. It may even be in the Year with the Saints book, about a woman who wanted to dedicate Saturdays and honor the Blessed Mother to fast on that day. And her confessor told her, no, do not do that. And she, of course, self-reflecting prayer, was very grieved by this because she really wanted to fast in honor of the Blessed Mother. And so the story goes that the Blessed Mother actually appeared to her and told her to not be grieved because she's actually sacrificing twice by doing what her confessor asked of her. And I'm losing my thought here. I mean, and the desire to do something else.
Yeah,
I think
God accepts the desire for
right.
the deed.
But that obedience is really what's going to be most beneficial, which makes me think of a quote, which is actually, it comes out of the book, but for the month of June is obedience. But I thought it was appropriate here, especially since we're in the middle of Lent, which is probably why mortification in March kind of happened. And this is from my personal patron in the Order of St. Francis, St. Catherine of Bologna, not Bologna, just, Okay. Without a doubt, obedience is more meritorious than any other penance. And what greater penance can there be than keeping one's will continually submissive and obedient? And I read this book before I came here, and that quote did stick out to me. So when you gave me the name of St. Catherine, I knew it would be St. Catherine of Bologna because she is a Franciscan. And the funny thing is, there's a lot of St. Catherines on the calendar. Many people thought it was St. Catherine of Siena, St. Catherine of Alexandria. And I'm like, well, there's a Franciscan Catherine. So I think that's what we're So, and I feel that quote really helped me in the beginning of the religious life, especially because no matter what, I was covered as long as I did what my superiors told me to do. And it actually helped me to not even try to make sense of an order. It's like, okay, great, I'll just do this. I don't have to worry about it. I just do what I'm told and move on. Mm-hmm. It's really a beautiful thing to have someone, and we all do. I think if we look at it, we all have someone looking out for us, someone guiding us. And we all have to exercise obedience, whether, work, school, really in the home life. I think the idea of obedience in I suppose as the married couple can kind of get a little, I don't want to say sloppy, a little matter of tension, because I know that there's
well, I think the easy thing to do there is not consider it as obedience as it is a sacrifice of your own will for the one that you love. So if I truly love my spouse, I am eager and willing to do whatever will please my spouse. And it is really a pleasure for me to sacrifice something in order to be able to do this good for the one that I love. And if my spouse asks me, it is my pleasure. It brings joy to me to know this is what my spouse wants. This is what will bring my spouse joy, pleasure. Therefore, I want to do it. And it's not because it is so much an act of obedience, but it is a gift, and every gift entails sacrifice.
And that's definitely a two-way street. And I think if the one half is struggling, in the sense that they're definitely trying to embrace that virtue, but their spouse might be struggling with that or fighting them on it. Really, I imagine the example of still trying to make that work will have its merits, sooner or later.
Yeah, well, I think the problem gets compounded when we start keeping score.
Yeah.
I did this for you. Well, then you didn't really do it as a gift. There really wasn't a sacrifice. You entered into this with the idea of a contract, an exchange, and that is the wrong motive altogether. If we're going to give something, we give without expecting anything in return, right? So, and when marriage relationship gets to that point where we're keeping score, you owe me, you have to do this and you have to do this for me because I did such and such for you, then love has been driven away. And these are no longer gifts, but these are now burdens.
Maybe you could explain it to me. You would think I would actually understand this by now, but it just popped into my head. So the religious who's obedient to her superior, obviously it's for the love of God and really for the love of the community and for the love of the superior. But what is that to the superior, I guess? I mean, whatever you ask of me to do and I do it, I'm guessing because you first of all, if you put something under holy obedience, that's not just something that's arbitrary. That's a very big deal. We won't let's get into, but do you share in the merit of my striving for obedience? Is this, it's still, even though you're giving me the command, it's still something we're working together on?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, the superior, the parents benefit from the virtues they instill in their children. And for each and every little act of obedience or virtue that your children perform, the parents are recipients of that grace also, not in the same merit, but I can say, not on the same level, but we all merit, and the world is a better place for everyone that practices virtue.
Well, I would think it's also a way to model how children then can ask something of their parents too. It's not saying, well, ask your parents like, will you go clean my room? That's not what we're talking about, but will you pray for me or help me with that? That's still, I guess, turning the table a little bit, giving the parent a chance or the adult a chance to, it's not that you're being like you're required to be obedient to your child, or you're not required to be obedient to me. I have nothing to command of you, but at the same time,
these are acts of love,
right?
Acts of self-sacrifice. So even the superior has to make sacrifices, and he makes sacrifices for the ones that he loves.
Like I ask you to take a walk with me, that's a sacrifice of your time,
my energies.
Well, I think I'm thinking the walks are supposed to kind of help you stay healthy.
Oh, okay.
That's my goal. So, but just as a child might ask a parent to play with them, there's that guidance on how to properly ask. So, and then you share in it. So,
I like to point out that whatever virtue anyone practices, the world is better for it, even if no one else sees it. But generally, someone's going to see it, and it is a good example to them. And the problem is we are inundated with evil, and evil begets evil. It's just constantly spreading. We influence each other, whether we want to or not, whether we realize it or not. We are this influence, and we are an influence either for good or for bad. I like the story of St. Francis, and I think it was Brother Leo. St. Francis told Brother Leo that they were going to go to preach in this village. They walked to the outskirts of the village, and Brother Leo was thinking, well, Brother Francis is going to begin preaching anytime now. They get to the middle of the village, and he's thinking, well, Brother Francis is going to begin preaching now. They get to the other edge of the village, the outskirts on the other side of the village, and Brother Leo says, well, surely Brother Francis is going to start preaching soon. They get outside of the village, and Brother Leo builds up the courage and says, Brother Francis, I thought you said we were going to preach in this village. And Brother Francis told Brother Leo, we have just preached by our example. So these two friars walking barefoot in odd-looking clothing, walking through the village, all the villagers who saw them either thought good thoughts or evil thoughts, but this was a moment, a source of virtue and grace for them if they received it appropriately. And so our very presence becomes a sermon. Our very comportment, how we behave, the expression on our face. So now, if we tell the religious novice, smile more, it will make the world a better place. It's not so depressing. It's not so negative. Yes, this world is a burdensome place. Our sins can be overwhelming, especially in the religious life where we daily meditate. We do this daily examination of conscience. Conscience can be a really depressing thing, can really bring us down. And so we need often reminders, and we can be that reminder to each other. This world is really a beautiful place. See the children smiling and playing. The sun is going to rise. God is still in heaven. God is still in charge. And despite all the evil that we've done, Christ has died for us. He's ready to forgive us. And all is truly good in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely. I mean, and we are, God loves us. He wants us to get to heaven. And that should be something that we think about often. And when you stop and think about it, is how can you not smile about it? I mean, yes, we need to reflect on our sins and try to improve and not commit them anymore. But it's just, if you're not careful, that will depress you and hold you back.
Well, and then when you're commanded to smile, sometimes it's very hard to force a smile.
Well, I mean, when I went out today, you did say, be sure to smile, which I didn't think a command, because I do try. And it's not a forced smile. I'm usually thinking about something positive, or I'm just happy. And I hope that that's just the, what I'm portraying as happiness, because I mean, well, when it's really hot out, and if I'm out there, some people are like, how can you stand it? It's like, it's really not that bad. Plus the car was air conditioned. So, but I want to, I mean, and it's not a false, it's definitely not a fake smile. I definitely do. And I'm very happy to be a religious. And I think that just when you really feel that way, you don't have to really work at it. Loving, if you really love God, it's just going to show through. If you're striving to love God, it's just going to show through, which makes me think of, I mean, really, thy will be done in the Our Father. When we say the Our Father, it's very simple. And I like to use it in Latin, fiat voluntas tua, pretty often on my lips throughout the day, along with a Deo gratias, but we're not done yet. Because it's just a simple way to just think about how great he is, that he gave us this day, this wonderful opportunity. And I think when we head towards the season of Lent, it often we do kind of feel dragged down by it. And I remember you said in a sermon early on, it might have been just before Lent, the idea of, if your mindset is like, oh, here's Lent again, you already got a little bit of a problem, because it's something we should be looking forward to. And that just really stood out to me. Because I think we tend to get, or we think we have to be extreme, or, we think this is such a difficult thing. And really it's so, minor what the church is really asking of us, but yet so beautiful. And sometimes you think, well, I can do better than that. I mean, I'm very grateful that the church has it in place, the laws of fasting, so that automatically you have something to go by. You don't have to try to figure it out yourself.
And there's holy obedience. I'm obeying the schedule. I'm obeying the calendar. I'm obeying the laws of the church.
All in that. Yep.
But I know that when you examine your conscience, it is very burdensome and it's very oppressive. And many people, I think, are walking around in the world today with this oppressive thought. But if we remind ourselves that this is actually a good thing to recall our sins, not to depress us, but God has given us this day.
Mm-hmm.
Today is the day that we can begin to turn the tide. We can turn in the other direction. So this is a source of joy, of consolation. I have been given the opportunity to do penance and perhaps save myself from going to hell or spending a long time in purgatory. So this is something to rejoice in, that God is still in heaven. He still loves us. He still wants to forgive us. And he has given me this day to tell him I'm sorry, to begin to do penance, to mortify myself in some way, and thus to really turn the tide.
As I think when we hear self-denial, it's just so contrary to what the world views today. I mean, basically, for a lot of people just flat out don't believe in God. So then suffering just becomes harder to grasp the concept, and we feel like we have to avoid it at all costs. But realistically, anyone who thinks that they're living it up, getting to do whatever they want, seek all sorts of pleasures, they're still suffering, and they're not. You're never going to be completely happy. We know this, but you just see it. Like you be able to. I think a lot of the heightened outcomes of like anxiety, even like depression. And I know those are real illnesses for a lot of people, but and I know a lot of us can also deal with being anxious. And
Well, I think there is a very large spiritual aspect to this, in self-denial and loving God. I think really one of the big deceptions of the devil is to present pleasure as if it were happiness. We seek pleasure thinking this will make us happy. We think we'll be happy if we have a good meal, if we experience pleasure within our body, the different appetites are satisfied, we will be happy. The devil paints this picture to us. The world paints this picture to us. Our fallen nature paints this same picture to us. And over again, we're inundated with this idea that if I could just find pleasure in my body, then I would be happy. I could find comfort for my body, then I will be happy. And this is completely wrong. Pleasure and happiness are two separate things. Animals experience pleasure. Our bodies experience pleasure because our bodies have the same thing in common with animals. Happiness is a state of our soul. It's a state of our mind. It's a state of being. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a choice. I can choose to be happy even in the greatest pain and agony. I can still choose to be happy. There may not be any pleasure in it, physical pleasure, but there is a spiritual joy, a spiritual contentment. And this is within my grasp. And I think truly when I listen to the devil and say, oh, I want this pleasure, and I pursue this pleasure, even if it is a sinful pleasure, I'm left feeling empty. I have this emptiness, this void within me. I'm disappointed. I'm let down because I was expecting happiness, and the only thing I received was a temporary pleasure. And, I could compare it to an intoxication, alcohol, drugs, sex, food, whatever it is. You seek it, you have that momentary pleasure. But then there's the aftermath of this pleasure. If you overindulge in food, you have a stomach ache, you don't feel well, you feel loaded, you feel full, you feel tired, worn down. All this food that would normally give you energy has now brought you down because you have sought pleasure rather than moderation. And it doesn't matter what it is that brings us pleasure. When we pursue it simply for pleasure's sake, we end up frustrated because what we're really looking for is happiness. And I think really the first meditation that opened my eyes to this was St. Augustine's Confession. Right there in the beginning chapter, our hearts are restless, O Lord, until they rest in thee. We're constantly in this disquietude, this unrest, because we're looking for something. What is that something we're looking for? Well, it's God, but I'm putting in here happiness, and the only happiness comes from God and loving God and serving God. But God is the source of this happiness. God is the source of this contentment. St. Augustine pursued all the pleasures, all the passions, indulged in them, and came back at the end of it all and said, none of these satisfied. None of these filled me up with what I was looking for. I was deceived. I was tricked. I thought if I pursued knowledge and understanding and I studied all these things and I know philosophy and I could teach rhetoric and I could argue well and I could teach and I would get a good job, I would be happy. St. Augustine did all that. And after he's done, he says, that wasn't it. If I could have the pleasure of a woman and sexual relationship, the pleasure of being a father, having a child, even without matrimony, that would make me happy. He did that. And yet that was not enough. And he, through introspection, looks back upon his whole life and says, what was it that he was truly pursuing? It wasn't knowledge. It wasn't understanding. It wasn't a position. It wasn't money. It wasn't the physical sexual pleasures. It was none of this. What he was truly seeking was this happiness and contentment in God. And this was something that God has placed in the souls of every one of us. We're all in this pursuit of happiness, and the devil just cleverly throws in pleasure and confuses the matter. Here, if you seek this pleasure, you will be happy. And it is a lie. And I think everyone old enough can examine his or her own conscience and come to that same conclusion. When I pursued pleasure, yes, I had a momentary pleasure, but afterwards there was disgust. It was empty. Even if it's a legitimate pleasure, it doesn't have to be an evil pleasure, because what we are truly looking for is union with God. And until we can begin to sacrifice those pleasures, sacrifice our own wills, we're not going to really experience that happiness, that freedom, that contentment.
Well, that makes me think of what's really a popular term out there is self-care, and whether or not that has a place in the Catholic life. And I believe it does when you think of it correctly. What the world kind of promotes is making time for yourself, which we all should do, but we should be making time for ourselves with prayer. And it's not to say you can't, at the end of the day, kick back with a glass of wine and watch your favorite show. Certainly you can do that. But as we talked about, did you give something to God first? If you really think about it, you're not going to enjoy, as you said, you're not going to enjoy that innocent indulgence to kind of unwind if you did not first give something to God. And sure, maybe you said your morning offering and went on with your day, but we also talk about how you really need to raise your minds to God throughout the day. And we've talked about that with, small prayers. But there's also options of, listening to sermons online, picking up a spiritual book. If one of your ways to relax is to, read something, when's the last time you picked up a spiritual book? There's plenty of things that are perfectly fine out there, but there's also a lot of things that aren't. But we do need to, because I don't want to say, going to go get a pedicure or a facial or a massage is wrong. It's definitely not. If you can afford it, it's not going to cause you any hardship in your family life. Doing those things are fine. But again, I think if you've neglected God, you're not going to really feel, I don't know, like you've given yourself a chance to relax. You're just not going to enjoy it because you did not do what was first most important. Does that make sense? Okay. Any comment on that?
Well, we have to take care of our health. We have to take care of our bodies. And God has given us the pleasure sensation with taking care of our bodies for a very good purpose. These are good things. Satisfying our hunger with a nutritious meal is a good thing. It's not evil. So in our sacrifices, we think, oh, I'm going to give this up. I'm going to eat less because food is bad. No, we're going to sacrifice eating this food because food is good. We're offering something good to God. We're giving up something that is good, not something that is bad. And I think too often we get confused about that also.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, the fifth commandment does command us, it does say thou shalt not kill, but when you dive into it, and it's My Catholic Faith is one of the books that when I read what was said in there, really opened my eyes to the idea of, starving, whatever it was, to lose weight, having the raw mindset. But and there were signs I was definitely harming my health, but it actually took reading that to say, you know what, I'm walking a very fine line here, with things. And if I don't try to rectify that, and the thing is, it's God gave us the food. It's good. It's good to eat. We should eat. We should rest when you need to rest. I mean, yes, we can easily fall into laziness. There's even something in a book we had for a book club a few weeks ago. It's the 12 Steps Up to Holiness and Salvation from the works of St. Alphonsus Liguori. And it did bring up what was it? It was a quote from St. Teresa of Avila. We omit prayer today because we have a headache, tomorrow because we had a headache, and the next day because we fear we might get one. And that stood out to me because I get a lot of headaches. And because it is easy to kind of slag off. Like if something has to be sacrificed, it's giving something to God seems to be the easiest one because we don't directly see him. I don't know. It's easier to disappoint him than to disappoint someone you live with, disappoint your children or your work. It's a lot easier to say no to God.
Because God doesn't punish you right now.
Right. But it's just so important to do take care of yourself. I mean, we all know that sleep is important. So, and sometimes you don't get as much as you'd like for legitimate reasons, like you have a newborn that, sleep it seems like you're never going to get sleep again. Whereas someone who stays up too late playing video games or watching TV at the risk of them not being fully functional the following day, those are choices that you have to really consider whether or not that this is not right. And I would say that is possibly would fall against the fifth commandment. I mean, if you're just taking advantage and not giving yourself time to rest, because rest is essential.
Yeah. And our society, I think, is bad for our health. We are a 24/7 world now, where you can get online, you can communicate with anybody any time of the day. You've got your cell phone, you can text, you can message, you can call, you can email.
You can shop.
You can shop 24/7. And we have electric lights. Anytime you can turn on the lights and it's just like daytime. And I think really this is bad for our health.
Yeah, science actually talks about that with natural light versus artificial light and what that does to you. So
just turn off the electricity for a week or two and then let's see.
Because I know you talk about it often that we have all these modern conveniences that are supposed to save us our time, and yet we have no time. We were probably better off when we didn't have all those things.
When nature forced us to rest.
Mhm.
It's too dark. I can't read any
Mhm.
longer.
Right. Candles are expensive. And I also think maybe because the laborers were a little bit harder. I mean, not that there aren't hard jobs out there now, but I also can see how if you have a desk job, how that really plays into it. Because I went from having a job where I was on my feet the whole 8 hours to a desk job, and it was actually very hard for me. I didn't like it. And I thought, well, this will be great. This is what everybody's telling me I should achieve. It's one of those, it was like a big corporate job, but and I didn't have to wear a suit because I worked from home. But as both women wear suits too. But I thought that this was definitely going to be automatically better because that's what the world was telling me that I should achieve. But I actually think in many ways, I slept better when I had the more active job. I felt like I got more accomplished. And that's not to say that people that have the desk jobs are less than, because there is a place for all that. And some people actually really thrive on that mentality. I just don't think I was one of them, but
yeah, it's hard to see that you've accomplished anything when it's all digital or electronic. Where's the fruit of my labor?
We were just talking about that. You don't see the return as easily.
Yeah. If I do something with my hands physically, I have something to look at to see. Even if it's cleaning up my office, okay, now I can look at my office and say, I've done something, I've accomplished something. But if I sit at my computer and type and type and type and type for hours, and I get this pain in the back of my neck and my eyes are burning because I'm looking at the screen and reading, I turn off my computer and I go and think, what did I accomplish? What do I have to show for all my labors? I'm exhausted. I'm in pain. I'm agony. But what do I have to show for it?
That's probably why the rise of hobbies is a thing, because it gives you an opportunity to see something that you accomplished right away. Even if it's reading a book and you see it as you're progressing on your nightstand and you finally finish it, there's something to that where
you see the bookmarker progressing.
Yes. Or when you build something or you have a garden, and I think that's why a lot of people try to implement those things, because we crave that. And that's not really, because, the instant gratification, we have a lot of that. And I think we all know how much more fruitful it is to have that delayed, something you're really working for. And that's what our spiritual life is. We're striving to get to heaven. We don't have heaven yet, even in the happiest day of our life. I like to tell children, picture the happiest moment you've had so far. Getting to heaven is way, 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 way bigger than that. I can't even tell you a number. And I know that can be hard to wrap your head around. Is it really going to be that great? Well, we believe it is. I know it is. God has told us it is in many, many ways. But don't give up.
Don't give up. We need something physical. We are physical beings. And I do believe even the person at the desk needs to step back and engage in the physical world around them rather than the digital or electronic world. Anybody who has tried to write knows, what do they call it? The writer's block. Mm-hmm. You push and you push and you struggle. And, I've done that myself. You sit down in front of a computer for 45 minutes, an hour, and then by the time you're finished, you just hit the delete button because you are so frustrated and it's not working. So all your work, you just delete and it's all gone. Mm-hmm. And now what has happened? I'm left feeling this negativity. I've wasted this time. I've wasted this effort. I've wasted this energy. And all of these, I think, are suggestions of the devil or our fallen nature, because actually the second time you sit down to write, you've already gone through all these ideas and it flows much more freely.
It's really part of the process.
You have to write when it's flowing. And to force yourself to a schedule is very difficult. Mm-hmm. The graces of God don't flow the same every single time or on our schedule. It's on his schedule. Mm-hmm. But when we're publishing, it's very difficult to, I've got a timeline here. Mm-hmm. I need to get this. I need to get it printed and get it out. People are expecting it. And if I fall behind, just a few days, we get
someone does notice, which is actually kind of was a nice experience. Like, oh, someone actually is expecting it right in this timeline. It's good to know. It's just.
But if we're doing it for the love of God, God will make good come of it. It's not all for naught, but we have to be able to see the spiritual aspect of these things and not just the physical reward.
And everything for the love of God, not just prayer, but our works and our sufferings. Everything goes to God, and you really can't go wrong. Yeah. Even if the world seems like it's fallen apart.
And some of the greatest ideas are going to come to you while you're trying to pray.
That is so true.
If you take the time to set aside, I'm going to pray now, then all of a sudden you're going to remember, I need to do this. I'm going to get this done. And when I'm finished with this prayer, I'm going to do this, and this. And you have it all figured out. But as soon as the prayer is finished, what was it I wanted to do?
Exactly. When that happens to me, usually I'll do is like, all right, Lord, if that was actually a worthwhile idea, can you please bring that inspiration back to me? Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
A lot of times it does. It stays with us because we examine ourselves and say, was that a good meditation? And say, oh, what was I really thinking about during my prayers, the office? What was I thinking about? What was in my mind?
Constant battle.
Was I really praying to God? And yes, going through our life, the material things we have to do, we can do that for the love of God. And that can be incorporated into our prayers, where we form the intention, I'm going to do this or that for the love of God, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that for the love of God. And this in itself becomes a prayer. And we begin to ask God, our patron saint, the Blessed Mother, our guardian angel, help me keep these resolutions. Help me when I get up from this prayer to accomplish what you have inspired me, and to really look at these things as a point of inspiration, as opposed to being something that is negative and distracting and pulling us down, weighing us down. There is something positive in everything. And if nothing else, we can see really how weak we are, that we cannot control our own thoughts or direct our own ideas to the goal that we set out before us. So there is even merit in that.
Yes, I remember you telling me early on, because I would get very frustrated how distracted I am during prayer, during Mass. And you just said, God appreciates the struggle. As long as you keep fighting, it'll be okay. And hopefully things will get better. But it just seems like something that I'm definitely going to struggle with for a while.
Well, this world's not meant to be easy.
No.
It's not supposed to be safe or secure. We're only passing through, and God wants to constantly remind us that this world is not our home. Heaven is our home. It's only in heaven that we're going to find this rest that we're looking for, this union with God that our souls are aching for. That is in heaven. It's not right now. Right now, it is the struggle that counts, and that self-denial, that taking up the cross, that is more important than anything that we can accomplish, any goal that I can reach. It's not the goal that is important. It is the sacrifice. It's the self-denial. It's giving up of my own will. I would like to accomplish this goal, but I keep being frustrated in reaching that goal. Well, if I don't despair and I keep struggling, God is interested in the struggle. I'm going to struggle for the love of God. I'm going to do this for the love of God. No matter what obstacle gets in my way, I'm going to smile. I'm going to let it fall off my back. Was it like water off the back of a duck? It's not going to get me down. And that's something that confessors deal with, I think, frequently in the confessional. I've tried, I've struggled, it's useless. I'm not making any progress. Are you fighting? Yes, and I keep falling. Our Lord kept falling too on the way to Calvary. Our Lord kept getting back up, and he kept getting back up. And I think maybe it's the German ancestry in me. You have to have that bulldog, that stubborn attitude. I'm going to do this for the love of God. even if it kills me.
Yes.
No matter how many times I get down, I'm going to get up. No matter how bad the headache or the illness, I'm going to do what I can. I'm not going to push myself to harm myself, but if I can, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go through this for the love of God. This will be my sacrifice to God. And God, I think, is more pleased with our failings than with our successes. And he gives us these crosses, these obstacles, because he wants us to struggle. He wants us to have a sacrifice. He wants us to have something to offer to him. And I jokingly tell people all the time, if you wake up one day and you find you don't have a cross and everything is good, you better start worrying, because God doesn't love you anymore.
Yep.
Because God has promised, you want to be my disciple? Take up your cross daily and come follow me. I take that as a promise that we will have a daily cross.
Right. It wasn't monthly, weekly.
Every
yearly.
day we're going to have a cross.
Something that popped in mind I want to get your opinion on is there's a popular quote, and I'm not exactly sure I'll have it right, but that's out there is the it's about it's about the journey, not the destination. And I feel like it's a little flawed because I think it should be both. I mean, because if you take it into a spiritual sense, what are you striving for? What's that end goal? Obviously, it's heaven. So yes, it is about the destination, but then you also have to consider the journey.
Well, you can't get to the destination without going through the journey.
Right. But it's just when people use that quote, they're talking about the now. And yes, we should be focused on the now, but our sights should also be on heaven. So I just feel.
Well, I think the destination is what motivates us to deal with the here and now.
So I guess that's why the quote just never made sense to me. And if I got it wrong, I'm sorry, but it always just struck me weird. There was something else that as you were talking, it came to my mind, and now I forgot.
If we're building something physical in this world, there's mistakes that we have to backtrack. I don't know if you've ever put something together and you're trying to follow the directions, but then you say, I can just look at the picture. And then you realize that, no, you can't just look at the picture. What you put together, you now have to disassemble and put it together in the right order so that it will work. You have this goal in mind, and that's what's motivating you. But it seems we always get in our own way, and we have to keep the ultimate goal in mind. Otherwise, we just throw it all away and forget it. The ultimate goal is to assemble this object, whatever it may be. And even if I cut my finger and lose a screw, I have to go find another one. Whatever obstacles get in the way, I can make them spiritual. And even this physical, material goal that I have is only part of the journey on my spiritual goal. I'm going to assemble this thing for the love of God. And that's going to motivate me to persevere. And even when I make a mistake, to perhaps back up, correct it, and start again. My sister likes to talk about teaching her to sew. And say, what if I make a mistake? I said, that's why they made rippers, sister.
Yes.
We just tear it out and try again.
Because there were a lot of mistakes in the beginning. There's still mistakes.
Just don't let it get you down.
Yes. Yeah.
And if it can't be fixed, we can always burn your mistakes, huh?
True.
But generally, we can figure out a way to fix it, make it good.
Yes, definitely. And that's certainly encouraging. Anything else you'd like to add? Do you want to throw any Job in there? Because that's usually.
Well, we all love Job.
We do. I think everyone feels a lot closer to Job because of you, Your Excellency.
And Job and the Blessed Mother, her fiat, which you mentioned.
Which, that's feast day coming up for the Annunciation. Great time to think about. And just because it came up in another book we were reading, talking about the Blessed Mother, she definitely was full of grace, and yet she still had hardships. She still, despite being born without original sin, conceived without original sin, she still had to suffer a great deal. So sometimes you think, well, if we just didn't have that happen, everything would be great. But that's really
I think without the cross, we would not love.
Right.
Truly, love is in self-sacrifice, self-denial. St. John says God is love, and then I look to Christ, and Christ says there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for the brethren, for those whom we love. And so really love is inseparable from sacrifice. Love is inseparable from self-denial. So I am deceiving myself if I think I love God and I'm not ready to embrace a cross. And I can break that down even onto the natural level. It is illogical for me to say I love someone if I'm not willing to sacrifice something of myself. And I often like to point that out to those preparing in the pre-Cana conferences. You see, if you love one another, you don't tell me you love this person because this person makes me happy. This person fulfills me. This person completes me. Because when you say these things, it's all about me. Me. That's not love. That is lust. That's self-centeredness. You're seeking your own physical pleasure, your own will. That is not love. If you truly love someone, you're thinking, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sacrifice this. I'm going to give this to make this person's life better. And when two people do this mutually for each other, there is nothing lost, but there is a tremendous gain. And I can see this in the natural level, but even more beautifully in the supernatural realm. Christ has given himself completely for me. And if I will fill up what is lacking in Christ by giving myself completely to him and living my life for him, making a sacrifice of my life as he has made a sacrifice of his life for me, nothing is lost, but there is this tremendous gain, this infinite beauty in giving of ourselves. And really that, I think, can only be understood if we truly love, if we're ready to give of ourselves, to deny ourselves, to mortify ourselves for a purpose of love.
And God is love.
God is love.
Well, Your Excellency, anything else you'd like to add?
I don't know. We could go on.
Probably. I didn't look at our start time, but I know we're probably getting close to 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
So, and less is more.
Very good. So we'll give you a blessing.
Yes.
Benedictio de omnipotentis, Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos, et maniat semper. Amen.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And then just a note for the month of April, we're going to be talking about the virtue of patience, which should be pretty exciting. Okay. But you have to wait patiently for that episode. So with that, Deo gratias.
Deo gratias.